Hi, everyone. Thanks for stopping by the Time We Discuss studio. Today I'm speaking with returning guest John Swift, and it's time to discuss what it's like to be a dream therapist. I have John Swift joining me. John, welcome to Time We Discuss.
Thank you. Good to be here.
All right, so for my longtime viewers, you'll see this familiar face in front of us, and I'm not referring to mine. John was with us earlier in the series. He is a licensed mental health practitioner, and today he's going to speak to us about what it's like to be a dream therapist. So, John, I know very, very little about dream therapy. I know at the end of your last segment, you gave us a quick rundown. But for the benefit of those that are joining us for the first time or close to the first time, our newer members, if you will,
Right.
what exactly is dream therapy?
So, dream therapy, I utilize it in my sessions. And really, what we do is we use the dream to kind of help the individual to get a sense of really what is going on underneath everything. Um, it could be trying to figure out things or just processing a loss or just the brain decompressing, just releasing that stress. So, so using dream therapy in that sense is very beneficial. I also use it in terms of individuals that have been exposed to trauma, and as we work through that trauma, dreams come up to the surface because then the brain is able to process that trauma and really kind of start to move on.
Okay.
So it becomes a very great tool to utilize in therapy.
How does one determine what dreams are beneficial from a therapeutic perspective as opposed to ones that are just random garbage?
Anytime a client of mine brings up, they'll tell me like, "Oh, I had this dream last night," and I will have them, "All right, well, tell me about it," and we'll go through as many details as possible. And I always say the more you remember, the better it's going to help in deciphering exactly what is going on in one's life. So after the person tells me about the dream, I go through a list of questions just to rule out just exactly that. Is this dream just the brain? Is it a brain dump, or is it something more that the brain is saying, "Hey, pay attention to this"? So those questions are really any of the things that in your dream, can you connect them with anything in your life, such as TV shows, things that people said, things that you've done, or just things that you can pull together like, "Oh yeah, that came from, my cousin. We were out the other night. Okay, I know where that is." So then we can tease that out. Like, okay, so this is just a dream that's just brain's just processing stuff you don't need. Versus things like where it's just like, "No, I can't figure this out." The one big question I also ask is, what is the emotion of the dream? Because sometimes the emotion is connected to something that has happened recently. So if a person is dreaming and the emotion is anger, they may be able to recall like, "Oh, my spouse and I had a heated argument over, whatever." And so like, okay, that's, and then we start talking about that a little bit.
When you go down the road of dream therapy, does your client approach you with that first, saying that, can we talk about my dreams that I'm having? Or do you bring it up first, saying like, what kind of, are you having any recurring dreams? Are you having any weird dreams, anything like that? And then kind of tackle from that. How does the dream therapy process actually start? Which end starts it?
Usually at the initial session, so our first session that I have with the client, not only do I get a sense of what they are or why they are coming in to see me, but we also discuss sleep. Are they getting the proper sleep at night? What is that like? And then I will ask them, "Do you have any dreams?" And we'll have conversations around that, and I will let them know that, if you do have dreams, bring them into session because we can do some dream work and discuss, try to figure out what it is that your dreams are telling you. And I really have a lot of fun with that. And I really make my clients feel comfortable with dreams because I have broken down dreams into a few categories. And the one I call is a meatball dream or a Dr. Seuss dream, which is those dreams that make absolutely no sense. But if you isolate things, it's like things that you have seen the past 24, 48 hours all come together in one dream. So, theoretically, actually, I can give you an example one because I actually had a dream last night, which was most bizarre, but I can piece together exactly where it all came from. So, so in this particular dream, it was our brother Pat and Matt. We were going into a vehicle, and Matt had this sports car, and there's a lot of snow, and we were going to go to the Phillies game. Why we were going to go to the Phillies game in the snow, I really don't know. But anyway, we drove off, and I forgot the Phillies tickets. And I said, "Oh, we got to go back because I don't have the tickets." So Matt is trying to make this U-turn, and we're like sitting in this road, and it's busy, and we finally get back to the place, and we're at the supermarket. I'm like, okay, and so we go into the supermarket. I get the Phillies tickets, and Sarah's with me, and so we are, and those who are obviously don't live in my family. Sarah's my wife, and she's like, I got them. We're good to go. So we start to leave, and we have this young girl that was with another family, but for whatever reason decided to be pushing our cart that was full of food. So now we're apparently doing shopping, and I turned around to check something out, and next thing I know, our shopping cart is gone. And I'm like, well, where did the shopping cart go? And I'm looking around the store, and things are kind of like in certain places, like they're organized. Some things are organized, some things are not organized. And I get back, and I see Pat has the shopping cart filled with like beach stuff. And I'm like, oh, no wonder I didn't recognize, where the cart went, because it's all filled with different things. And at that point, I had no idea where the girl went that was pushing our cart, but I guess she went with the family that she was supposed to be with. And then, of course, I wound up waking up. Using that, a lot of elements. So there's been the whole beach thing has been talked about with the family because it's been very warm here, and we're talking about maybe going to the beach this weekend. At least Sarah and I, might head to Cape May, while the kids are away at a beach retreat with the youth group. So you have that whole beach there. And the Phillies tickets, Sarah and I were just talking about the summer, and we're meeting up with friends of ours at the Phillies game in July. So we're marking the calendar down. The food store, yesterday we were also making a list of like, okay, today I got to go to the food store. I got to get milk, eggs, some other odds and ends. Okay, Phillies tickets. So, all those things are like, just come into this meatball dream, just the brain processing like, okay, these are all the things that we talked about. We really don't need them. And so, that's an example of a meatball dream, or a Dr. Seuss dreams, as sometimes I refer to it as. Other times, most dreams we are problem solving, just trying to figure things out. And that's the majority of our dreams. And then, of course, you have the other part of dreams where it's truly the subconscious is really bringing things to the surface that we really need to pay attention to. And then, of course, you do have the spiritual dreams of people that talk about someone that had recently passed, and they have a dream of that person visiting them in their dream and giving them a message of like things are okay, or kind of more of a peaceful message. And then furthermore is that each person has their own dream matrix. So what is meaningful to one person is not going to be meaningful to someone else. So all those dream dictionaries that are out there on the market, they're junk, they're garbage. Because case in point, is that if you're an individual that is afraid of spiders, that spider in your dream is going to represent something totally different than a person like myself who has no fear of spiders. So you're going to walk away with two different interpretations. So when you have those dream dictionaries, like, oh, if you dream of this, then it means this. It does not, because everybody's an individual. We all experience life in a different way.
Probably many years ago at this point, I was at the dentist in real life, not in a dream, in real life. And I used to have this recurring dream, and I don't have it as much anymore, thankfully. But it's one of these dreams where your teeth are like either really loose, like if you can actually feel it, like in your dream, like your tongue against your teeth, you can actually feel them, kind of like when you're a kid, you had like like that feeling of the loose tooth. And so the dream would be that I'd have loose teeth, or like teeth would just like one would just fall out, or they would just fall out. And I remember asking my dentist about that. Like, this is, as a dentist, if people ever complain about, ever talk about this, does it mean anything? And she didn't have any answers. But it turns out if it's particular to certain people, it could represent something for one thing for me and something else for someone else.
In that sense, so if someone were to come in to me with that dream, and I would explore, like, oh, gone to the dentist, have you had any teeth problems? I'd ask the basic questions. And it just say that, like, no, I'm not sure, it came out of nowhere. So then I would then draw out that emotion, like, well, what was that like for you in the dream? What did you get a sense of? And that person's going to attach that emotion to it. But like, it could be like, well, I felt scared, or I felt, a sense of loss, or this is kind of strange. So then I start digging deeper into that. Like, okay, so sense of loss. Let's talk about that sense of loss. Where are you feeling that sense of loss? Or where is that oddness, that strangeness that you felt in that dream? Where's that happening in your life? Where do you feel that? And then that really propels us into what is going on deep down with the person.
Does it frequently happen where the same type of dream for a specific person comes up over and over again at different parts of their life? So for instance, if I'm a person that anytime there's a big event really going on in my life, I get really scared, we'll say. And maybe that represents, in my dream as like I'm being chased by a monster. Do you find from your experience that, like, anytime a big, scary or stressful event comes up in my life, it manifests as like the same type of like monster in my dream, or something that could span, years or decades, or as the person ages and grows older, might turn into something else?
We do see that because the way the dreams work and the brain works is that it's going to use something to, again, bring up that emotion. So if if the brain wants to create a certain emotion, it's going to have this object, and so you can identify with fear, or anger, or whatever it may be. So if someone is experiencing the same thing throughout time, then we can say that's part of the matrix. Like, okay, so this monster could represent stress. It could represent a big change in someone's life, a transition from one thing to the next. That is key, because then the person understands that, like, okay, so I'm going under a big change right now. So, and what is change like for me? Change is really scary, kind of like the monster. So it's all symbolic, but yet it's really communicating to what we're feeling, and to bring it up to the surface and acknowledge it. Like, okay, so how can I deal with this change? So I don't, hold it in, become stressed, and, I become all tight. So it's just the way the body and the brain process and really want to bring things up to the surface.
Okay.
So I had an individual that she would have these dreams of, like, this entity, this shadowy entity. And she said, the environment of my dream changes. Like, I could be in the kitchen and this entity is there. I could be having a family party and this entity is there. Or I'm trying to sleep, in my dream, and this entity is floating above me. So as we started to dissect this entity piece, Um, Make a very long story short, that entity is her matrix of being stressed. Whenever she's stressed or cannot relax, that is the entity. And that's basically the brain saying, you need to relax. You need to decompress. And then we tie that into the dream, saying, yeah, you're trying to sleep, but you can't because you're stressed. You're a family party. You're stressed because you're taking care of everything. You're not relaxing. You're not enjoying it, and all these different things. So we can really zero in on that, and then it's like, okay, so how do you relax? And then once she relaxes, the dream totally changes. So she reported of having a dream, which also is a reoccurring dream, is that she is horseback riding in like an open field, mountains, like very peaceful, like just feeling very free. And she's connected that dream with when she's really feeling at peace and not having a lot of stress on her.
There are so many things I want to ask you. And I'm having this battle in my head, this battle of epic proportions in my head, trying to like figure out which one is going to be the best one. I think I'll do lucid dreaming first. We'll do that. So, is lucid dreaming, from your experience, is that ever used alongside therapy to like that like if, from my example, you have this monster in your dreams. Do people ever use like lucid dreaming to try to then fight the monster like from the inside of your head to try to conquer the fears on the inside and the outside? Does that ever work? Does that ever happen? What's that like?
So I do not use lucid dreaming. Um, and the reason being is because I'm really working with the person, like with the dream, I'm also doing therapy. So it's really just kind of taking like what it is that what is coming up to the surface and exploring that. And if there is that monster, really, again, exploring with that. What is with that monster? What is the fear? What is behind that? And really empowering the person, saying, there is nothing to be afraid of this. Like it's a change, but I have the supports. I have like really recognizing their resources and understanding like although it's a big change, it's really not that big of a deal. I can take this on. Um, and that's where I go. So I really don't use, actually not really, I don't use lucid dreaming at all.
I'm going to put you on the spot with this question.
All right.
So you said one of the types of dreams is where people they have a dream and they say that they're visited by someone that's recently passed. Um, Now, hearing different stories of what people have said, they often phrase it like this dream, it was realer than real. It seemed so real compared to my other dreams. And I've had dreams like that where it's not like I'm meeting with people that are deceased, but I've had dreams like for whatever reason, this particular dream felt so real to me. What do you say when a person says to you like that they had a visitation from someone and it seems to coincide with a recent passing or the passing's birthday or anniversary or something like that? How do you not address that, but what do you typically say to that person?
So I ask them what is their belief. I really rely on the individual's belief, and that's where I go. I really let them lead the way. I do not discount it. I don't say, well, that probably ties into the recent passing. I throw the question back at them because really the dreamer owns the dream, and I'm really a person that, we say we interpret dreams, but really the individual interprets the dream. I just ask leading questions to help clarify exactly what it is that they're going through. So I'm not going to come out and say, this is what it means. I'll ask the question to see if they can come up with, I think this is what it means. And they may say, do you think that's what it means? Like, if you think that's where it's going, then that's probably it. I think you know the answer because we do. We do know the answer. It's just, we just need someone to help bring it up to the surface. So getting back to your question, I really let the person lead the way. If they truly believe that this person had visited with them, then we take it for that. Um, that is totally a true, unexplainable experience. As you know, there's things in this world we just can't explain. So, um, yeah, true spirituality. I just let the individual just lead the way with that.
Okay. So I have another one for you. So I love paranormal stuff. I love things that we can't explain. I think that there's so much about this world we don't know. We're inventing stuff all the time. Who would have thought, 40 years ago we'd be able to do this, that this would be
Right.
available in pretty much anyone's home or even in anyone's pocket with their phone. So there's so much we don't know about the world. What do you think when it comes to people that they've experienced like the night terrors or the nighttime paralysis? Does
Mhm.
that tie into their dreams as well? Like, does finding out what is causing that help dissipate that over time? Have you had any experience with people that suffer
Mhm.
from that sort of thing? What's that like for you?
Night terrors, definitely I explore that to see where that is stemming from. And typically it's some sort of trauma, or just a fear that just hasn't been resolved. And typically I will see, well, in my experience, the night terrors I've worked with, um, usually kids, uh, first, second grade, and it is usually over things like the dark, or they can't really explain maybe noises that they hear at night. And it could be the house settling, it could be the wind blowing outside, or they've seen a scary movie and then all of a sudden, or a scary show, and all of a sudden it has filtered into their dreams. And they just have these dreams of either animals coming to get them, or people breaking into their house, or just just very scary things. And so I will work with the kids and try to figure out exactly what is scary, and identifying things that frightens them. It could be in the home. So, for example, I had this little girl. She was first grade. A lot of night terrors. She constantly was dreaming of like people, like just bad people coming into the house. And she couldn't see. She just knew bad people were coming into the house. Couldn't see because it was dark, and the dark was the scary thing. I started working with her, and then, of course, like most kids, she was scared of the closet. And so, as we explored like what was in the closet, and so the parents had a night light and everything, so the closet wasn't so scary. Um, but one of the things that I had to do to really help her overcome like these night terrors is that the big thing is that she wanted to feel safe. That was the bottom line. She wanted to feel safe. So it's like, okay, so what is it that's going to make you feel safe? Tell me about animals. And she brought up, she's like, I love wolves. And so we talked a long time about wolves, and what they do, what's so good about them, what does she like about them. So the wolf became her protector. So what her mother did was that they got a picture of a wolf and hung it in her bedroom. And that was it. That was the end of the night terrors. She just wanted to feel safe. And so sometimes digging through that, it just brings things up to the surface, and reassuring her she's okay. Um, so yeah, so night terrors pretty much common with little kids. I haven't had any experience with adults having night terrors. Maybe an occasional nightmare, but not the not they're sleepwalking, things like that. But now sleep paralysis is actually experienced by a high percentage of people at some point in your lifetime.
Have you ever had sleep paralysis?
I have, yes. And initially, I mean, it's been long time ago. I think, gosh, I must have been in my teens, so eons ago. Um, but initially, yeah, I mean, it's scary because you can't move, but you're awake. And so, really, what is happening during that is that you're not fully awake. Like your muscles are asleep, but your brain is awake. And so typically what happens when we sleep is that our brain shuts down our muscles and and um, and it's all locked down for the purpose of so we don't act out our dreams. And what happens is obviously when we wake up and we interrupt that system and both pieces of the puzzle don't come online at the same time, you get that sleep paralysis. Like, I'm awake, I can't move. What's going on? And you start freaking out. And it's usually, it doesn't last very long. It may be, it seems like an eternity, but it's really only, 30 seconds to a minute. And then you're able to move about.
One thing I have to ask you about this, because like
Yeah.
my own interests, you know, do you know from a dream perspective, do you know, has there been any like studies done, for lack of better terms, for lack of better words, why some people have the same type of experiences when when they have sleep paralysis? You know, you might hear people talk about, shadow people or the Hat Man or something like that. Do you know, has anything been done, like why there seems to be like this universal idea, I guess?
There's a lot to be said for like the universal experiences. Everybody has those. Yeah, I was dreaming I was flying. We have those universal dreams. When you are have that sleep paralysis, sometimes it's our imagination at play. Yeah, because it's dark, we can't really. You're really sometimes in panic mode or survival mode. It's like, what's going on? What's happening? And so your mind is kind of racing in a way. Um, and so you might have a little bit of an active imagination during that time. However, go with the unexplained. You know, so it's hard to say. Why do people describe the Hat Man? Because it's such an odd description. I could see like a shadow, but figuring with a hat, it's kind of it's odd there.
John, we didn't get a chance to talk about education at all. So real quick, if someone wants to
Yeah,
become a
yeah.
dream therapist, how do they do this?
It's really not that hard. I mean, the education itself is fairly easy. So I attended the School of Health and Science in London. I mean, it was an online class, and through that, I mean, they give you, they give the whole gambit of things. How the dreams, not how dreams work, but how the brain works when you're asleep. You have your beta waves, your alpha waves, sleep cycles, REM cycles, and so forth. And once you complete that course, you have the certificate. I mean, there are parts of the course where you have to, interpret dreams and so forth. But and I use the word interpret very loosely. Um, but I mean, it's yeah, anybody can really do it. You don't need a certain certification. I mean, you can do it yourself just to see what your own dreams are like. Um, and so if one were to pursue like an actual like dream like therapist, I always recommend it go hand in hand with either being a social worker or a psychologist or a mental health therapist like myself, um, or either one of those fields are working with in mental health, because that tool is going to aid you and your client to just get a better sense of what's going on just below the surface. Dream therapy by itself is really not. It's not really standalone. You know, it's I mean, someone can tell you the dream, but if you don't have the skills behind the way the brain works and asking those deeper questions of, you know, well, where's that sense of loss, or, you know, being able to dig deep, then that tool becomes very useless to you. It's like, okay, you know, I can do this. You know, I'm a plumber by day and dream interpreter at night, but that's not going to get you anywhere. I don't think people are going to really find it meaningful. So I say it's really beneficial for those that are in the mental health field. But if one wants to take the course just to understand their own dreams and what is going on, they can easily do it.
All right, that's awesome. That's good to know. It's a great tool for someone that's already in the mental health field, and for anyone that wants to pursue it, there's an avenue for that as well. John, whenever I have people on the show, I do like to give them a minute or two to talk about something that they believe in, a project they're working on, a cause they believe in, a business that they work for. So if there's something you'd like to discuss, the floor is yours.
The company that I work for, as mentioned in the previous, is the Therapeutic Wellness Group here in Delaware. And our practice is expanding. I mean, I think we just hired on 3 new people. So we're familiar with Delaware. We're kind of very close to the Pennsylvania border. So we get a lot of Pennsylvanians coming over to our practice. It's all in person. But yeah, you can easily look us up online at therapeuticwellnessgroup.org. And all of our profiles are there. We cover everything from toddlers all the way up, you know, to the late, you know, 70s, 80s. You know, anybody that's having a health problem, mental health problem, we cover. We do trauma. We have a new young lady that just joined a practice that's dealing with eating disorders, and working with you know, young women and women that may be dealing with body image issues. So, which is a huge asset to our company.
From your experience, do a lot of places that offer therapeutic services, do they offer dream therapy too? Is that very common, or is that something if someone's very interested in, they need to really to look and ask the right questions ahead of time?
Yes, so they would have to ask those questions ahead of time, because dream therapy is a few and far between when it comes to therapists utilizing it. You may find, you know, people may advertise dream therapy at some of your I'm going to say like your spas that will do like Reiki and some of your I call them new age therapies, or hypnosis, things like that may offer dream therapy. But as for a mental health therapeutic practice, most clinicians do not offer dream therapy. So that would be something that they would have to really specifically ask for.
Awesome. That's really good to know. John, it's been awesome having you on Time We Discuss once again, and this time talking to us about what it's like to be a dream therapist.
Yes, thank you for having me on once again.
Thanks for popping in the studio. My name is Dan, and this is Time We Discuss. I really enjoyed speaking with John today. Be sure to check the links in the description to learn more. If there's a profession that you want me to cover, add a comment and I'll find that person for you. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. That'll do it. See you next time on Time We Discuss.